Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, freaks and geeks, trolls and derps alike, welcome! Welcome all. I am Mullet Mike, bringing you Creepy Gaming. That's right, folks, today we got a special episode for you. Today I'm going to delve into the theory category of the filing cabinet, in which we will be talking about the Squall is dead theory from Final Fantasy VIII. I want to thank everybody who suggested this. Special shout out to all of these fine folks. I want to thank you all so much for your suggestions. If you have a suggestion for Creepy Gaming, then be sure to leave them in the comments below. Alright, not much to get into the way of today's episode, so we're just going to dig right in. Turn the lights down and the volume up as we journey into some Creepy Gaming.
Think what you want, but reality isn't so kind. Although it can be said that there is a very fine line between fantasy and reality. When I think of the word fantasy, one thing comes to mind: Final Fantasy. Nothing says JRPG to me like the Final Fantasy games. The series lets players enjoy empowering journeys and fantastical settings. The Final Fantasy games have evolved over time just like anything else. Once starting as a developer's last-ditch effort, the series has evolved from 8-bit sprites to the visually stimulating epic that it is today. The games are innocent and harmless enough, for the most part. Sure, the series goes dark in a few places, and at times goes a little too over Western audiences' heads. But overall, there's not that much creepiness to it. Well, unless you want to discuss the eerie theory of Final Fantasy VIII. Following up one of the series' favorites, Final Fantasy VII, developers knew that they had big shoes to fill. But rather than trying to top the emotional roller coaster that was Final Fantasy VII, the sequel had to take a different direction. What we got was one of the weirdest, most bizarre, creepiest entries to date. Released in 1999 for the PlayStation, Final Fantasy VIII silenced most skeptics and received critical praise. Although to say the game got a mixed response from players is an understatement from hell. This fantasy follows the adventures of Squall, Renoa, and company. Patient, persistent players who finished the multi-disc game were met with a surprise that they weren't really expecting, thus sparking a theory that has continued to be debated to this very day. We're about to go in depth with this title, so consider this a spoiler alert. Squall Lionheart is the lead protagonist. His name is actually a play on the words Lionheart, meaning one with much spirit. Following fan favorite Cloud from Final Fantasy VII, Square decided to make their new lead character tough with little to say. It is theorized that Squall actually dies at the end of the first disc, and the rest of the game is his dying visions. Now, whether a dream, hallucination, or dare I say, fantasy, this vision can be considered his life flashing before his very eyes. It seems as if Squall begins to explore the questions that were raised in the first part of his journey. The theory goes as such. At the end of Disc 1, Squall and his party face the sorceress Edea. After a hard-fought battle, she conjures an ice shard and sends it directly through Squall's chest, causing him to stumble back and fall off of the platform. He sees Renoa above, reaching out to him as he falls. Squall closes his eyes and begins his journey through death. Now that we have the accusation, we will go over the evidence to support such a disturbing theory in this non-horror title. When starting the second disc, Squall awakes from unconsciousness, something that happens quite a bit in this game actually. He wakes up in a Galbadian desert prison. The first thing he says is, "Where am I? I challenged Edea. My wound. No wound. How?" After this, I can't recall Squall or his party members reference this event again. Not even once. Most players seem to assume that Edea healed Squall to full health for the purpose of interrogation, but why? He knows very little top secret information than the others at Seed may know. And you gotta remember, at this time, Squall was just a mere rookie. I've also heard people use the Phoenix Down debate, but we've learned from Final Fantasy V and VII that a Phoenix Down won't always revive the dead. Don't make me remind you of this heartbreaking scene. Alright, enough of that. Another potential piece of evidence is the substantial change in the game's tone. For the most part, Disc 1 is more realistic and down to earth. Well, as realistic as a Final Fantasy game can be, anyway. Disc 2 is where it gets weirder. It gets weirder. The game becomes even more fantastical and clashes with the tone that was set at the beginning. Not just that, but the title begins to center more around Squall personally rather than his party in general. This could be further proof that Squall is experiencing some form of wish fulfillment. Remember how I said earlier about Squall raising a lot of questions regarding his life in Disc 1 and how they get resolved after his supposed death. Moving on, the character Cypher is your rival. This was established at the beginning of the game's opening cutscene as we see the two battle, but they have a mutual respect for one another. Renoa, who is the female lead, has feelings for Cypher, creating an awkward love triangle between the three as Squall has feelings for her. This changes from Disc 2 onward. After Squall's supposed death, Cypher is full on heel, and now Renoa, who didn't really care for Squall in the first place, suddenly now has feelings for him. I know Final Fantasy games can be somewhat convoluted at times, but do you see what I'm getting at here? Elements in the story have been completely changed within the first quarter of the game. If Squall really is dead at this point, this would explain the sudden shift in the game's dynamic. While dying, Squall sees what he wants to see. From his romance with Renoa, to Cypher suddenly becoming an asshole, to Squall rising up the ranks as a Seed rookie to the leader. All of this may indicate that Squall in his dying dream is seeing what he wishes would have happened. Now, I know I've already spoiled a lot, but major spoiler alert, because now we are about to talk about the game's ending. We good? Alright, this is where it gets even creepier. When you're getting close to defeating the game's final boss, Ultimecia begins speaking in what seems like just random sentences. but when they are placed together, it creates a foreboding monologue that may further prove that Squall is dead. Now, this is creepy gaming after all, and I'm sure a few of you are thinking, okay, this is an interesting theory and all, but what's so creepy about it? Well, you're about to see. I am now about to show you the ending cutscene from Final Fantasy VIII, and you tell me what you think. We see Squall alone in a dark place. We then see flashbacks to the ballroom scene earlier in the game, where Noah's face eerily begins to shift and distort as if Squall's memory is slowly fading. The screen then whites out, signifying Squall has finally died. As the clip ends, you will see the feather that was floating from the very beginning finally fall. We get a lot of quick shots and clips, You probably noticed it, but if you slow down the footage, you will see this notoriously familiar, disturbing image. Does this represent the death of Squall Lanhart? Or perhaps the emptiness he feels as if there is a void in his life? Now, I know I'm probably looking into this way too much, but if people can dissect the simplistic by comparison Five Nights at Freddy's series, then can you imagine how deep one can look into a 60-plus hour game? And people have done it! There are entire websites dedicated to this theory. I have merely touched the tip of the iceberg. There is much more out there to back these claims. There's even a theory about Renoa possibly being Ultimecia, but I'm not even going to get into that. If you want to read more on the Squall is dead theory, then feel free to check out the sites below to see the numerous arguments made to further prove this disturbing theory. I remember playing the game when it first came out over 16 years ago, which is just mind-blowing in and of itself. And here we are, still talking about Final Fantasy VIII to this very day. So again, how do you follow the insanely successful Final Fantasy VII? Well, I would say do exactly what Square did at the time. Make a great game with an intriguing story that makes this strange theory plausible. I don't know if it was planned ahead of time or not, but it has definitely added a mystique to an otherwise possibly overlooked game. As I've said before, I've played Final Fantasy VIII when it first came out, and I guess I didn't notice the possibility. I remember when starting the second disc, I was like, well, that was weird. But there was just so much to the story, I didn't think Squall was dead. I recently played through a second time, now knowing of the theory, and my mind was blown. I could totally see it. So much added up to support the Squall is dead theory. But that's just my opinion. We're all entitled to one. So what is yours? Do you believe in the thought of playing most of the game as a dead Squall? Or is this just some overblown, overthought, overhyped theory? Let me know in the comments below. Because if Squall isn't dead, I would love to know what the fuck the ending means. If you have access to it and you have the time, give it a playthrough. Check it out for yourself. Because of the possibilities, the eerie ending, and the creepy faceless Squall, I would say Final Fantasy VIII has done more than enough to earn its place in creepy gaming history, regardless whether or not the theory is true. To me personally, what could be more fitting than for this game to really be Squall's Final Fantasy?
So was this intentionally put into the game by Squaresoft? Is Squall really dead, or is this just some fan-made theory that is just kind of grew in hype over the years? I would love to know your thoughts on the Squall is dead theory in the comments below. Other than that, I think that's going to do it for today, folks. So I want to thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I am Mullet Mike with the pedal and full screen saying keep stay creepy. Thanks for watching. Wait for it. Peace.